Hello and welcome to the 17th installment of our War and Peace 50 Pages a Day quarantine read through. We are covering pages 800 to 850. I am Matthew Robinson. Joining me as always is Dimitri Portnoy. Hello, Dimitri.
Hello, Matt. Hello, everybody.
Let's
Never thought we'd get this far.
let's talk about some dead people.
Mhm.
Who did we lose today in the book?
Well, reportedly, Anatoly and Andre.
Those are some pretty heavy hitters. Those are some above the fold names there.
Absolutely. Anatoly, we last saw being amputated a leg,
Yep.
and Andre being treated for a stomach wound, which is normally lethal
Right.
at that time, and also even now.
So yeah, let's talk about both those deaths. Anatoly's death is we actually see it through Andre, who doesn't quite jump on a grenade, but a grenade is thrown near him or an explosive lands near him. I think it is a grenade, and he chooses to not run so as to show bravery to those around him and in essence jumps on the grenade, although I don't think he saves any lives by doing it, but he tries not to show fear, although it probably would have been better if he did run. The grenade explodes and he wakes up in a hospital where he hears the pathetic, sad, infant-like screams coming from nearby as he sees a man's leg being shown to him as it's removed from his body, and we find it to be Anatoly, which feels a bit vengeful on Tolstoy's part. It feels a little horror movie vengeance of the virgin having sex and being brutally murdered. It's Anatoly gets a very grim death, screaming and crying, and the man he wronged gets to witness it with his own eyes. It feels cold from Tolstoy to me.
And convenient.
True. Yeah. Yeah. It's.
Uh,
Go ahead.
every once in a while, like with Andre arriving just in time to witness the birth of his son in the previous volume, Tolstoy occasionally descends to a dramatic
Yeah.
moment from something you might see in a bodice ripper.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And before Andre's death, we get a classic War and Peace moment again of the air and the sky and the trees and a moment of peace and tranquility where all of a sudden everything makes sense and all of his priorities are in order and life seems so simple and clear right before he dies.
Yes.
Uh,
Spoiler alert. He came back from the dead once.
he's already been killed once and brought back. He's the Buffy the Vampire Slayer of War and Peace for sure. They kill him every season. Um, yeah, so this is a very gory battle. The Battle of Borodino is brought to a close here. They say Napoleon prides himself on being able to walk amidst the dead of his battlefields where he's victorious. And on this one, he can't even bring himself to do it because it's too gory. The only thing that he can take any solace in is the fact that he's being told that 5 Russians died for every 1 Frenchman. And he holds tight to that statistic as some sort of comfort blanket. Once again, Napoleon not looking like a good guy through Tolstoy's eyes.
No, he suddenly becomes very vulnerable, but in a icky, cowardly way,
Right.
not in a way that we can sympathize with.
And we're sort of told what's going to happen in the next 100 pages or so. We're told that Moscow will be abandoned, that Moscow will be burned, that 100,000 lives will be lost due to the burning of Moscow, self-inflicted burning of Moscow. Um, I think somebody's waving at you behind you, Dimitri.
That's not me. They're
No?
waving to Ashley.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Um, Excitement happening all around. I appreciate you keeping your social distancing going, staying at least 10 feet away from those dangerous people.
If I could stay 10 miles from those people, I would.
uh,
But I do want to say
yeah,
something
go ahead.
about Moscow and Tolstoy's point about Moscow because he brings up two cities, Zaragoza
Yeah,
in Spain,
yes.
where every single citizen stayed and fought the
Mm-hmm.
French. So they literally had to go house to house to clear out the buildings.
Yep,
And also a city like Berlin, where everybody stayed and made friends with the French
right.
and threw parties for them and had a very nice life. Uh, Tolstoy kind of says the Russians do neither.
Yeah.
They are willing to abandon comfort
Mm-hmm.
before submitting to the enemy, but they're also not willing to die needlessly.
Yeah.
And I think Tolstoy praises uh, the Russians in Moscow for that,
No,
a
there's
kind of a
definitely
middle ground.
some Russian patriotism here on Tolstoy's part for sure. Absolutely. I mean, he does describe that many died in the forests outside Moscow, freezing to death and starving to death, which is a pretty awful death, and
Yeah,
self-inflicted.
Russians freeze and starve to death a lot. There was the siege of Leningrad,
Yep.
Petrograd in this novel in World War II. That was horrific. Um, it's interesting that there's a war waged by Napoleon against civilians,
Mm-hmm.
and Tolstoy is very conscious of that. Maybe before that thing became uh, a bad thing that's universally recognized by the law.
I don't think Napoleon would have killed them, though. I think he would have happily occupied them bloodlessly.
Absolutely. He wants subjects.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful passage in the book where, which is actually a quote from Napoleon's memoir that
Mm.
he wrote on St. Helena, where he says, I just wanted everybody to travel freely. I wanted all Europeans to be
Right.
united. I
Yeah.
wanted to erase borders. I wanted free trade. So Napoleon is kind of a proto EU person,
Yeah.
which his methods are awful. His
Yeah, clearly
aims are,
that's a bit of self revisionism there, as he I mean he was a monster who slaughtered countless people.
we can agree on that, yes. And a fat, hairy, piggish monster.
Yes, hairy and smelly, as he's been described. We get some behind the scenes looks at the meetings that decide what to do with Moscow, which is interesting. We get Kutuzov, proclaiming. Sort of shocked. How did we get here? How did this happen? Are we abandoned? He keeps having these we're put in the sort of the moment to moment movements of his mind as he's going, are we deciding to abandon Moscow now? Is this the moment it happened? Did it happen at this meeting? Like he's in the meeting wondering if this is the meeting where they decide to abandon Moscow. And he sort of just, once again, this Tolstoyan, deconstruction of the great man theory of even the people who apparently made the decisions don't feel like they're making the decisions and aren't even there's so many moving parts and so many different machinations to all of these decisions that nobody feels like they're the one actually pulling the lever, and I think nobody wants to feel like that. No, he doesn't want to be. Nobody wants to be the person who abandoned Moscow. You know.
And Kutuzov, in that wonderful climactic moment, as a little girl watches him,
Yeah.
a 6-year-old girl
Yeah.
watches him in the cabin, basically says, all right, it'll be on me. I will take it on myself. I will make the decision to abandon Moscow.
Yeah.
So none of you needs to take the blame.
Right. Because no one's willing
And
to
I
do
think
it.
for
Yeah.
Tolstoy, that's a heroic moment.
Yeah. And he does sort of, he ends it mumbling, they'll eat horse flesh, they'll eat horse flesh. The only thing he can sort of make himself feel better about. At least they'll have to eat horse flesh.
And true, it turns into a prophecy.
Yeah. All right, let's move away from war into a moment of peace and the ever more unlikable Helena,
Oh my God, yes.
who has converted to Catholicism in order to null and void her marriage to Pierre, so that she can choose between two suitors, unnamed suitors. We only get their initials because that's how irrelevant they are. Unnamed suitors who have both proposed to her now, and while her husband is risking his life and hundreds of thousands are dying, she is looking for religious loopholes to marry a better man and get out of her marriage without going to hell.
Yes.
It's not a good
And
look.
only one person in all of Moscow and St. Petersburg calls her out on that. Lady Bracknell,
Yeah.
Marianne Dmitrievna,
Yeah.
who's very loud.
She is shunned for that.
She shot for that, yes, but she does tell her that your reasoning is what they have in blank.
Yeah.
And while that blank is not specified, it is specified as a curse word.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's saying this is the reasoning they have in whorehouses.
Mm-hmm.
And she's calling Helena a whore, which
Yeah.
is what Helen has always been called throughout history, not just this one, but the original Helen
Sure.
of Troy.
Sure, absolutely.
By no less a personage than Homer.
We do get a comical scene where her mother comes to her, with an argument ready to lay bare, her daughter's plans, and she thinks this is a foolproof argument, and then her daughter explains to her that no, she's going to switch to Catholicism, and that Catholicism won't recognize the religion she married her husband under, so the husband won't be the religion won't be validated by God, so now she can marry anybody, and it ends with her mother going, "Oh, wow, that's totally true. Why didn't we think of that when we were your age? These young people are so smart."
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And she does get from a Jesuit priest a little box of biscuits.
Yes.
That the host, the
Yeah.
specially prepared host for her to snack and nibble on.
Yeah.
And I think that is ultimately what drives Pierre out of society. Ultimately, what makes Pierre lose his head,
Yeah.
because his wife has thrown herself in with the Jesuits, who are the mortal enemy of the Masons.
Yep.
And Pierre belongs to the Masons. He gets a little bit of flack for that from a local count,
Yeah.
who considers the Masons traitors. But it's just, there's no way in which Helen can hurt Pierre more. I mean,
Yeah.
like what could be the cherry on that sundae?
Yeah.
What is the one religious order that she could align herself with who could not be more of an enemy of Pierre's Masons? And that's the Jesuits.
Exactly. And so she sends a letter to Pierre, who is dining with the low soldiers, just the basic militia, as he's brought back towards his fancy inn, which is currently occupied, so he has to sleep in his carriage. And he's called in, as you said, by a military officer who's told, you should probably get out of here because pacifists and Masons, who were pacifists, are being seen as traitors, and it's now a hangable offense. And we know that you've been helping them, so you should. I'm going to just pretend you're a good guy and say you need to get the hell out of here and go hide.
It's interesting that this Count Rostopchin is an historical figure who wrote sarcastic little flyers and posters that were hung around Moscow. So Tolstoy, again, it is representing a fellow writer in a very interesting, curious, and critical light.
Yep. Well, that's pretty much where we leave off. We are waist deep in the war section of War and Peace. This is almost all war, except for a little bit of Helena's religious loopholing. But we have lost some huge characters, potentially. We have seen, we are at the low point, I would imagine, of the book right now.
Which is where we should be at this point of
right.
any novel.
Of any novel, exactly.
2/3 of the way through is the Dark Night of the Soul.
Yep.
The only relief is that Petya, Natasha's brother,
Yep.
has feelings for her
Yes.
that are more than brotherly. And once again, there's a lot of incestuous things pointed at Natasha. Someone better marry her
Yeah, quickly
before
before
she
she
does something
unholy.
really bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so we will be back tomorrow, and we will be heading into the final quarter of our novel at page 900. Enjoy your next 50 pages, and Dimitri, enjoy the rest of your walk, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
And enjoy the rest of your. Uh, can I say happy birthday to your mom?
Oh, that's very sweet. Yes, it is my mother's birthday. That is very kind of you. Take care,
Happy
y'all.
birthday.
Bye bye.